Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Most Muslim countries, including Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, are celebrating Eid Al-Fitr today, marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. But prayers are being held in a limited way, with full observation of health protocols to prevent the spread of coronavirus. In his message, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan called on the Muslim world to celebrate Eid with responsibility amid the pandemic. Israel has continued its bombardment on the Gaza Strip as the death toll from airstrikes rises to 69, including 17 children. US President Joe Biden says he is hopeful that a cycle of violence in Gaza and Jerusalem would end soon. After a phone conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Biden said Tel Aviv has a right to defend itself. Meanwhile, the US has blocked another joint statement of the UN Security Council on worsening hostilities in Gaza. A three-day nationwide ceasefire between the Afghan government and the Taliban has begun to mark the Muslim holiday of Eid Al-Fitr. The truce comes hours after security forces mounted an operation to recapture a district outside Kabul. Meanwhile, in his Eid message, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani termed foreign troops withdrawal the best opportunity for the Taliban to end violence. The global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 160 million, with more than 3.3 million deaths. India has recorded over 4,100 fatalities and more than 362,000 infections in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, another 126 people died, while nearly 3,300 tested positive for the virus overnight. These were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, most Muslim countries, including Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, are celebrating Eid Al-Fitr, marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. The occasion is being observed in a limited way, with full observation of the COVID-19 precautionary measures. Eid prayers around the Muslim world were held in a limited way with full observation of health protocols to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi has sent his wishes to the nation and urged them to adhere to the coronavirus precautionary measures. In his message, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan also called on the Muslim world to celebrate Eid with responsibility amid the pandemic. In Turkey, the historic Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque hosted its first Eid al-Fitr prayers in 87 years, while thousands of Palestinians offered their Eid prayers at Al-Aqsa Mosque despite the continuous airstrikes and violence from the occupying Israeli forces. Meanwhile, Israel has continued its bombardment on the Gaza Strip as the death toll from airstrikes rises to 69, including 17 children. US President Joe Biden said he is hopeful that a cycle of violence in Gaza and Jerusalem would end soon. After a phone conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Biden said Tel Aviv has a right to defend itself. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the US is sending a diplomat to urge Israelis and Palestinians to calm harrowing violence. The secretary added Israel had a particular responsibility to avoid civilian casualties. 25 Democratic members of the House of Representatives called on Blinken to pressure Israel to halt the forced evictions. However, the US has blocked another joint statement of the UN Security Council on worsening hostilities in Gaza. World leaders continue to condemn Israel's atrocities and express support for Palestinians. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and Saudi King Salman bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud held a telephonic conversation. The Prime Minister expressed concerns about the latest situation, saying Israel has defied all norms of humanity and international law. Turkey's Vice President Fuat Oktay said Muslim countries must show a united and clear stance and criticized world powers for condemning violence without acting. The Russian foreign minister says a meeting of 4 international mediators is urgently required for resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The International Criminal Court's prosecutor expressed concern over the possibility of war crimes in Israel and Palestine. Meanwhile, Israel's president warned of a civil war between the country's Arabs and Jews as violence and lynching spread to other cities in Israel. Now, a 3-day nationwide ceasefire between the Afghan government and the Taliban has begun to mark the Muslim holiday of Eid Al-Fitr. The truce comes hours after security forces mounted an operation to recapture a district outside Kabul. Many Afghans describe the short holiday pause in fighting as a fruitless gesture and called for a permanent one. In his Eid message, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani termed foreign troops withdrawal the best opportunity for Taliban to end the violence. Meanwhile, former U.S. officials have urged Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to speed up visa issuance for Afghan workers who have worked for Washington. Now, Indian troops have arrested 5 family members in the Pulwama district of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The occupying forces continued their violent cordon and search operation in the valley even on the day Eid Al-Fitr. The operation was going on till last reports came in. Meanwhile, the Indian atrocities continued to impose strict curfew in the territory. They did not allow people to offer Eid prayers at major mosques of the valley. Now in Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed another 126 lives overnight. The Health Ministry says the country's death toll has reached 19,336. It said more than 3,200 people contracted the virus over the past 24 hours. The number of confirmed cases in the country has crossed 870,000, of which over 776,000 have recovered. Health officials said the number of active cases in the country has declined to 75,000. Over 4,500 of them are in critical condition. While the global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 160 million, with more than 3.3 million deaths, India has recorded over 4,100 fatalities and more than 362,000 infections in the past 24 hours. More about the pandemic in this report. As India's caseload reached 23.7 million and death toll crossed 258,000, the World Health Organization said the country accounted for 50% of global new cases and 30% of deaths over the past week. The health body's scientists said some evidence suggests the new variant of COVID-19 in India may be more transmissible and contributing to the surge. With hundreds of thousands of cases daily, India is also struggling to keep up the pace of its much-needed mass vaccination drive.
मेरा second dose है कल और
I need to get my second dose. I came yesterday and came again today, but they don't have the doses available. They have asked me to come back again tomorrow or some other day for vaccination.
Brazil will run out of raw materials to produce the Sinovac vaccine by Friday, as a supply shipment has been held up in Chinese export clearance. Sao Paulo governor blamed the delay on diplomatic ill will, saying the federal government should apologize to Beijing for its harsh criticism of China. Over in the U.S., the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said 28 people developed blood clotting syndrome after getting the Johnson & Johnson shots. As U.S. political leaders grow increasingly desperate to persuade Americans to get the vaccine, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine topped offers of baseball tickets with a $1 million prize drawing.
We will announce a winner of a separate drawing for adults who have received at least their first dose of the vaccine. This announcement will occur each Wednesday for 5 weeks, and the winner each Wednesday will receive $1 million.
Meanwhile, a study has found the number of coronavirus infections in England has halved since March, helped by the swift rollout of vaccines. Scientists at Imperial College London say an average of only 1 in 1,000 people got infected, but new variants remain a threat. Moving on now, in Myanmar, the anti-coup protesters have yet again taken to the street in the Sagaing and Tanitharai region of the country. In Mandalay, Buddhist monks call for an end to the military dictatorship. Meanwhile, a reporter from a banned news agency has been sentenced to 3 years in prison by a military court. Min Nyo is the first journalist to be convicted under the revised penal code that activists say criminalizes free speech. Rights group Amnesty International has called for an immediate release of Neo along with all other journalists. At least 785 people have been killed and about 80 journalists arrested since the army seized power on 1st of February. Now moving to Colombia, where anti-government protests have entered their third week as union student groups and others convened a national strike. 42 people have died so far in the protests that began on 28th of April against the now cancelled tax reforms. Thousands of people gathered in the capital Bogota's Bolivar Plaza. They were calling for an end to police violence and inequality and the withdrawal of health reforms. Protest leaders had called for a national strike after a meeting with President Ivan Duque yielded no results. The US and the UK have condemned the violence, while the European Union has warned against excessive force by police. The UN Security Council also adopted a resolution to extend its peace monitoring mission in Colombia until October. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back now. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro says he is willing to hold Norway brokered talks with opposition leader Juan Guaido. Earlier, the country's opposition said that Oslo had been facilitating contact between the two sides. In a televised speech, Maduro said he will agree to dialogue with the involvement of European Union and Norwegian government. Maduro added he is open to see if the dialogue yields positive outcomes.
I agree with receiving help from the European Union, the Norwegian government, the contact group, whenever they want, wherever they want, and however they want. I am ready to meet with all the opposition to see what comes out of it. If something good comes out and they abandon the path of war, invasion, attacks, the coup, and come to the campaign trial, here we wait for you.
Norway facilitated talks between Maduro and Guaido delegates in 2019, but they failed after the government withdrew in protest against the US sanctions. Now, China has slammed Western allegations of human rights violations in Xinjiang, calling them an utter political farce. This comes as the US, the UK and Germany organize a virtual event to highlight alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang. China's UN mission says these accusations are aimed at suppressing Beijing by creating domestic political disturbances. Chinese diplomat Guo Jiakyun said Beijing welcomes everyone to visit the autonomous region. But he said China opposes any kind of investigation based on lies and with the presumption of guilt.
So-called genocide, forced labor, systematic rape and torture in Xinjiang are lies of the century, which never happened and will never happen in China. I could tell more truth, but you don't give me more time because you reject the truth. Xinjiang Autonomous Region of China has held 40+ press conferences, but your media refuse to report because you fear the truth. China has nothing to hide on Xinjiang. Xinjiang is always open.
Well, now moving on, UN Special Envoy has called on Yemen's warring sides to make the concessions needed to conclude a peace deal. Addressing the Security Council, Martin Griffiths warned the opportunities currently on the table might not be available later. The envoy reiterated his call on Houthis to immediately stop attacks on Marib. He said the longer the Marib offensive continues, the greater the risks to Yemen's broader stability and social cohesion.
Griffiths said the conflict could possibly spill into areas that have remained mercifully far from the fighting. He emphasized that Yemen cannot be governed effectively without inclusive partnerships. He added the internally displaced persons in Marib continue to live in fear. The oil-rich governorate is the last northern stronghold of the Yemeni government. Houthis aim to seize. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has apologized on behalf of Britain for the deaths of 10 people killed in a 1971 incident in Belfast. He said this during a telephone call with the Prime Minister and Northern Ireland's First and Deputy First Ministers. Johnson said London wants to deliver a way forward in Northern Ireland which focuses on reconciliation and delivers for the victims. Earlier, an inquiry found that British soldiers used disproportionate force in the deaths of 9 of 10 people killed in the incident. The shootings happened after an operation in which paramilitary suspects were detained without trial. Some 3,600 people were killed in the conflict between Irish nationalist pro-British paramilitaries and the British Army. The sectarian conflict largely ended after a 1998 peace agreement. Now, in Russia, a court has jailed the former mayor of Yekaterinburg for 9 days. Yevgeny Roisman was charged with organizing an illegal rally for the release of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. In a tweet, Roisman mocked the ruling, saying this is what constitutes a call for protest. Earlier, he had urged his nearly 5,000 followers on Twitter to take to the streets. Authorities have stepped up to their crackdown on opposition activists in the wake of protests calling for the release of Navalny. The Kremlin critic is serving a 2.5-year jail sentence for parole violations on an earlier embezzlement conviction. Now, an Imperial jewelry sale has fetched nearly $3 million at auction at Christie's in Geneva. The items at the sale included a set of sapphire and diamond objects that belonged to Napoleon's adoptive daughter. There were 9 items from the collection of Napoleon's daughter Stephanie de Beauharnais. There were also a sapphire crown that previously belonged to Queen Maria II of Portugal. The jewels were among 144 lots that went under the hammer, achieving total sales of more than $63 million. Christie's jewelry department had says the items sold for 3 times its pre-sale estimates. The jewels date back to the early 19th century and are believed to have been a wedding gift for the de Beauharnais. Saudi Arabia's ban on imports of Lebanese agricultural produce has multiplied the woes of local farmers. The ban was imposed on Lebanese perishable items in April over allegations of drug smuggling, but in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, fruits are ripening and vegetables are growing up with no buyers in sight. This report has details.
The Saudi market for exports, worth $24 million a year, has been shut down for now, leaving farmers racing to find alternative buyers abroad. The growers acknowledged that smugglers did exploit loopholes in the export process. However, they say the Lebanese authorities have now tightened border controls.
There were gaps that smugglers made use of. They knew the scanner was not functioning, and this is why they pushed to export from Beirut, from Lebanon, to other countries. Now the state repaired the scanner and they tightened controls at the crossings.
Lebanon's government has promised to work with Saudi Arabia and has also asked Riyadh to review its ban. A collapse in the Lebanese pound has aggravated the worries of farmers who need to buy fertilizer at inflated rates.
We can't continue anymore. Everything is loss on top of loss. The fertilizers and chemicals are all priced in dollars. We can't make it work. Loss on top of loss. Sitting at home is better.
Saudi Arabia said pomegranates from Lebanon had been hollowed out and filled with captagon pills, a type of amphetamine. With no exports, prices of vegetables have plunged in Lebanon, complicating matters for people and farmers alike.
9 business stories. Major Asia-Pacific markets have declined as Wall Street fell sharply with inflation data triggering fears of a rate hike. Investors are awaiting tech giant Alibaba's first quarter and full fiscal year results that will be released later today. Japan's Nikkei 225 plummeted nearly 2% to lead the losses. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index dipped nearly 1%. In mainland China, the Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen Component both shed more than 0.5%. In South Korea, the Kospi dipped marginally, while Australia's ASX edged down over 0.5%. Markets in Malaysia, Singapore and the Philippines are closed due to holidays. Tesla Incorporation has suspended the use of Bitcoin to purchase its vehicles. Tesla CEO Elon Musk made the announcement in a tweet citing concerns about the use of fossil fuel for Bitcoin mining. Musk said Tesla will not sell any Bitcoin and intends to use it for transactions after mining transitions to more sustainable energy. He said the company is looking at other cryptocurrencies that use less than 1% of Bitcoin's energy. Tesla's chief added, "Cryptocurrency has a promising future, but it cannot come at the cost of the environment." Bitcoin fell more than 7% following the announcement and traded at $52,669. And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.